Okay, we continue from the other meeting, the previous meeting. After meeting, we just like go for record, okay? Itu gonna write this. Okay, from here, okay, that's example. In the example, the test doesn't recognize that if decision contain multiple decision, the condition and therefore requires a modified condition decision coverage testing. It is of like A. However, this drawback can be indicated on Boolean. It's a code or use the drive test case. Display testing. The possible path to test object, software statement, or branches in the control flow have been the focus of the OR test cases. Derivation, however, if the test object includes a loop or other kinds of repeat steps, the technique we have to look at so don't test sufficiently thoroughly for the testing demand on the more possible for the test object or tester. Okay, wait before I'm continue the meeting. I think I should say this is same video like the previous video, but I have to cut it because the what is the name? The Zoom meeting is not longer can use that account in that account. Yeah, and yeah, I need to change the account to can record this for the task. Okay, we continue. As you can see, there's so many paths through the control flow graph also we can to derive. Even if you limit the number of the repeats over the loop, the number of possible paths quickly increasing beyond control. Okay. There's a case study, statement decision coverage in VSR2. The custom model is calculated price. Okay, the method of parameter using the valid and invalid equivalence partition. The following example of evaluated test case according to the coverage in example, according to which part of method is executed. The aim is to achieve 100% decision coverage in order to ensure all decision results are tested at least once. Okay, so code and there's image and a picture. We continue. Okay, there's like this a test case, like a test case 1, ABC GMN, and the same test case 2, ABC GMN. This is okay. Okay, like the example, the relationship between the different types of the coverage. We also need to look at the relationship between the statement, decision, and path coverage. The test object has total of 3 if statement, 2 of which are nested, like we can see on the statement notes or the graph is reached using the following sequence like A, B, C, J, K, L, N, A, D, A, F, I, J, K, L, N, A, D, Z, H, I, J, K, L, N. Okay. This is sequence of 100% statement coverage, but not all decision are covered. HM hasn't even traversed. Yeah. Sample task case that includes the MH look like this: A, B, C, J, M, N. Okay. If we replace the first sequence of the 3 lists above with the new one, the resulting test case provides us with a 100% decision coverage and 100% branch coverage. However, there are other paths through this program that we haven't yet covered, such as ADAFIZMN and ADGHIZMN. Okay. Other white box testing technique. Other white box testing technique, there are many more white box testing technique available. Okay, there's a more white box testing. Okay. Then is a common one described here is also ISO 29119. Also, one of the more interesting of this is data flow technique. Oh, data flow testing. The more interesting, sorry. Data flow testing, for various testing, various techniques are used to the flow of the data through as a test object and the referred test case. The basic principle involves observing the use of a data within a test, the usage of the test, the use the usage of the each variable is analyzed, whereby the definition of the read or write access to a variable are different from one another. The techniques check whether values arise if the value of a variable changes when the value is used elsewhere in the program. Furthermore, the technique checks whether the value of a variable is used to calculate the more of the other variables or to determine the logical values of the condition. The resulting information can then be used to define various data flow criteria that can be covered by the test case. There is a detailed description of data flowing testing in ISO 29119. Okay. Okay. Evaluation of the white box testing. Okay, this is evaluation. The basis of the all white box testing technique described in this chapter is a source code. Suitable testing techniques can be chosen based on the complexity of the program structure, and the testing the thoroughness is determined by the source code and the type of testing technique you have chosen. The whiteboard techniques described here are the most suitable for a low-level testing, such as unit testing, and it makes little sense, for example, to the demand coverage of the individual statement of or a decision during the system testing. The code-based whiteboard technique requires a specific program parts of the be executed and or organization to take on a specific logical value. In order to analyze the result, you need to know which part of the program have already been executed and which still have to be run. This kind of a coverage assessment can be automated using appropriate tools. Okay. As well for checking codes, the concept of the test coverage is useful at the higher testing levels too. For example, it can be used during integration testing to evaluate the percentage of models, component, and object-oriented. The classes that have been executed, like a model coverage and a component coverage and the class coverage, the required percentage value has to be defined in the advance and verified once testing is complete. Requirements that are overlooked and therefore not implemented cannot be identified using these techniques. Only requirements that are genuinely put into the practice can be tested using a white box testing. Other technique have to be used to identify missing code. Okay, that's a 5.3, like a experience-based test technique. Like the previous we review like the black box testing in the 5.1, and 5.2 5.2 is white box testing, technical testing, and that experience-based technique. Okay, alongside the methodical test case derivation techniques, tester can use their experience and intuition to derive additional test case too. Experience-based testing can be used to discover the fact that are often overlooked by systematic testing. It usually prudence the augment systemic testing with the experience-based test. This kind of a technique can vary in their efficacy at discovering the fact, depending on the tester area of the expertise. Experience-based testing makes it difficult or simple impossible to define a degree of coverage that can be used as an consideration. Okay. As well, a testing experience, a test Tester can use their experience developing a similar application or knowledge of the technologies being used to derive appropriate test case. For example, a tester with the experience of a particular programming language can use a defect whose causes lie in the use of the language as a basis for deriving test case for the current project. Okay, intuitive test case derivation. Intuitive test case design is based on the intuitive ability to use accepted errors, faults, and failures to select a suitable test case. In this case, there is no methodological technique, and the tester had to rely on the ability to recognize situation in which defect or occurred in the past, or on a knowledge of the how earlier version of the test object work, or awareness of what type of error developers are likely to make. This commonly used test case derivation technique is called error guessing. On the methodological way to support this technique is keep list on the error, fault, and failures that you have to discover in the course of the past project, or that you have to compile from on knowledge of the recent software fails, and use them to help derive the next test cases. Always try to keep such a list current, that update them with the new experience as soon as they occur. You can determine a kind of a coverage figure by calculating the percentage of the list entries that you use to write test case. Okay, there's a checklist-based testing. As the name suggests, this a technique use a checklist. Okay. Technique use a checklist as the basis for the deriving test case. A checklist contains aspect of a program. An example, test condition that need to be tested. This includes things like exception handling and reliability. Entires in the checklist should remind the tester to include this aspect in the resulting test case. Orders aspects include regulation and special case or a data condition that requires checking. The level of detail in the checklist varies enormously from project to the project. A checklist are based largely on the individual tester experience. They are usually compiled over a long period of time and are updated regularly. However, this doesn't mean you shouldn't use the standardized and edited checklist. You can use a different checklist for a different type of a test. For example, one list could contain condition for the example testing, while another contains the condition for the non-functional testing. Using the checklist can help you retain a degree of a consistency when testing. However, because the condition the content or the worded generally the test case driving using the will vary depending on the which tester ends of the testing with the condition. This variation increases coverage of the individual aspect in the list, but reduces the overall level of the test repeatability. I need to make sure. I hope there's no problem while I record this. Wait.
Recording in progress.
I think it's safe. Okay. Okay. Here too, you can measure coverage by calculating the percentage of the list entires that are covered by a test case. If all aspects of the list area test, you have achieved 100% coverage and can stop testing. Case study check was the best testing for GUI. UI style got compilers. To insert the interface of user and looking for access to the model, the technical preparation, decrease install code. Defines a look like a field element in VCR2. The interface is start getting transport the most important step to check space to verify the dialog on bugs and a tester critical copy checklist which is circuit can you see? Oh wow, they use a test base at the test bench. I mean, checklist based test session verify the PSR by okay. Okay. Okay, we continue to the exploratory testing. If the document requires for verifying test cases are outdated or low quality or simply not available, you can approach the situation use exploratory testing. In extreme case, you may be faced with just the executable code and no other supporting information, or with significant time restriction. This tactic is quicker to implement the perform then other testing technique is based largely on the tester intuition and experience. This technique sees the various testing activities performed almost simulateness. The testing for a procedure doesn't follow a predefined structure and advanced planning is involved. The potential element of the test object and their tasks and function are the explored before deciding which element to test. A few tests follow, and the result of our analyze running such tests help to clarify the test object as yet unknown behavior and any conspicuous anomaly or other data result are then used to write new test cases. This step-by-step technique enables the tester to accumulate knowledge about the test object purpose and functionality, as well as any quality issues that expectation the program can fulfill. Exploratory testing usually result in conclusion about which other testing techniques to apply, like a black box, white box, or experience based, provide of a course that there is time to conduct further tests. Exploratory testing can be structured by defining testing objective and or by limiting the time you take to the exploring using like a time box. Exploratory testing connects with a limited time box, not usually exceeding 2 hours. It's usually referred to as a session based or there's a session based. Okay. The test conducted and the result you receive are recorded in a session sheet. It makes sense to limit exploratory testing to specific program elements, blocks, or a function. It's a selected element and then subdivide into a smaller sub-elements, which are then announced in the test charter. A test charter usually contains just one test objective to the guide their testing. Okay, the following question addresses why is the testing being carried on? Okay, carried out. What is to be tested? How it's to be tested? What's the problem or to be identified? Okay, the result is influence the design of execution subsequent test cases. During a testing, a virtual model of a program is constructed that details what it does, how it works, and how it behaves. A test are performed to verify the model, while simultaneously identifying other aspects of the test object behavior that are not yet part of the model or are only present in a different form. Here's case study like exploratory testing of the PS2. Exploratory testing is closely interwoven with reactive testing strategies, as all exploratory testing activities can only be undertaken once the coding is complete, because neither the requirements nor the source code are the exclusive tests for testing. intuitive test case derivation techniques can be unambiguously assigned to either the white box or the black box technique. However, it is currently a technique that is the best suited to the higher test level, as there is usually sufficient information available on the lower levels. Intuitive testing should be used as your primary testing technique. Okay, we cannot use a primary testing technique is intuitive testing. We can't. But rather as a way to supplement your existing test case and to support other systemic testing technique. Okay, there's a test case. The experience that a tester used to design additionally test case come from a variety of sources. Okay, there's like a intuitive test case for a PCR tool. Okay, sorry. A tester needs to use all of her knowledge to derive and designing additional test case pre or and post condition accepted output and design additional test case pre or post conditions except output and expected test object behavior have to be clearly defined or for intuitively. There's a tip. Can also is extreme. Oh, such a list can also be extremely useful. There's too useful to programmers as it help to identify potential issue before implementation takes place. Okay, wow, we need to list. Okay, defining exit criteria. Typically, exit criteria like the ones defined for the systematic testing a technique cannot be precisely defined, but list if they exist can be used to check how many the known users have been tested. Intuitive checklist based and exploratory testing technique is usually quite successful or great additional to other systematic testing technique. The degree of success they yield depend very much on the skill and intuition of the tester involved, and also on their previous experience of a similar application and technologies. These techniques can also have identifying gap of the risk in analysis. Combining intuitive and systemic tactic can also help to reveal previously overlooked inconsistencies in the test specification. However, it is extremely difficult to reliably be sure testing completeness or thoroughness. Okay. Okay. Okay, this is selecting the right technique. Okay, this chapter had been introduced a large number of testing technique, and the obvious question they raise are which are to use and when. The following section address this equation and overhelp in deciding how to process. The generally objective is used as a little effort as possible to generate a suspicion number of test cases to so that can existing value will be revealed with a predictable degree of certainty to do this. You need to select the right technique for this deriving your test case. Some testing techniques are better suited for use of particular test level, while other can be used on all levels to make efficient use of the available time and budget. A tester usually use a combination of a technique to derive test cases. Test analysis, design, and implementation technique range from extremely informal to thoroughly formal, and the degree of a formality depend on the individual situation. The influencing factor there are the maturity of the development and testing process, a time restriction and a data security, and the regulatory requirement, the knowledge and skill of the involved, and the software development model in use. The following section take a closer look at this and other factors that influence the process. Okay, let me see. Okay, the type of test object. Okay, the factor of the type of a test object, if the test object is a component, in additional functional a black box, in addition to a functional black box testing technique as well, using equivalence partition and boundary value analysis, you can use white box techniques too. If you are testing a complete system, use case or a stage in transition testing are the more appropriate. Okay. If the test object is a part of the user interface of a system, the focus testing is more likely to be a non-functional. For example, to test usability, it is a non-functional. Okay, thank you. Okay, the next factor is the complexity of the component or system. The adequacy of the chosen testing and technique depend on the complexity of the source code. For example, if the decision in the code depend on the multiple conditions, simple condition testing won't suffice. The techniques you choose to test component decision will also depend on the importance of the component and the risk involved if it fails. Okay. The adherence to standard in industry standard or legal regulation often define the testing technique that have to be used and the required the degree of the coverage. Such standard usually apply for the safety critical application or the where reliability is the key. Okay, the customer of the contractual requirement, the customer may stipulate which testing technique to use and the degree of the coverage required. This ensures that at least which a prescribed tests are performed during development, which hopefully leads a fewer failures during the acceptance testing. Okay, next is the testing objective. The objective of the testing process vary a lot. The focus can be on a functional quality characteristics such as completeness, or correctness, or appropriateness, or any verifying that the plan system or a component architecture has been fully and correctly implemented and that it's a fulfilled specification. A testing technique can need to be selected according to the specific objective. Okay. We need to know the risk of analysis too. The accepted risk determine more or less which the testing activities takes place. In example, test type and thoroughness. High risk component need to be tested more thoroughly and using a different techniques of the other component. Okay, then a plan software uses. Risk analysis include the plan use of the system or component or also influence the test procedure. For example, an application that evaluates the certification and a further education course will be tested less thoroughly than one that control on power distribution in the hospital. And the simple test is a probably a suspicion for the former, while the latter should be subject to the combination of testing techniques and the verifiability, high degree of coverage, availability of documentation. If a formality worded models or specification are available, this can be directly imported into the appropriate tools for deriving test cases. This significantly reduces the effort involved in the designing and writing test cases. If the documentation is outdated or simply not available, exploratory testing can help you to gather. Oh my God, wait. Okay, to gather information about the test object and design your initial test. And then the available tools testing without using desired tools is not recommended from statically. And also tools investigate codes with a possible anomalies via tools and designing test case to difficult. Okay. Knowledge and skill. Input tester have to have a positive experience in early defect detection using a particular required knowledge and effectively using a required technique. Okay, the type of faults. If you expect a particular type failures on your component or system, it makes selecting of appropriate testing technique simpler. For example, if you expect a range limit to the poorly adherence to, you need to test the boundary value analysis. And software development models, the development models in use influence the choice of the testing techniques too, because the test to be repeated more often. Agile development model requires a highly automated testing in contrast, and heavily defining a test development in a test level in a V model. Okay, time and money. Time and money are a factor that can be a strong influence on the testing technique you choose. Both are usually limited, so you need to apply techniques that are test satisfactory in the shortest time possible in the respect. The more you can automate the testing process is the better. Okay, this is not. The more can you automate the testing is a process, the better. Okay. The test technique you use to derive your technique can be the selection process. Okay, the summary, the last one, the summary. The correct functional is of the central importance to any software system. So through code testing of the test object functionality needs to be guaranteed because the accepted reaction and the output from the test object are defined for each test case, whichever techniques you use. Comparing the test result and or object behavior with test expected or automatically test object functionality. Okay, you can easily decide whether defect is present or functionality. And then using equivalent partitioning and the boundary value analysis to derive test case is recommended for the every test object. We also recommend that you use appropriate tools to automatically measure the degree of the code coverage achieved by this test. If a different test state of influence on component flow within the test object, if you need to perform test transition test. If you only type the specific satisfactorial evaluate the interaction between the states of transition corresponding function behavior. If the dependencies between input values need to be tested, use decision table to document the dependency and derive evaluation test case. Okay, side note. Okay. On the system testing level, it can be used basis or use case diagram. Okay, we need to use case diagram. Can we use a basis for driving test case? And then during the component integration testing, measurement of the degree of coverage be achieved, but also be a care of the black box testing. Any part of the test object can have not be tested or observed white box testing. The white box testing you also will depend on information of the test object. You should always aim to achieve 100% decision coverage. If the test object contains the composition, you will need to use a modified condition decision coverage test to identify erroneous decision. Okay, white box testing always apply to the low level test, and while black box testing can be applied of the all test level. It is always beneficial to supplement systematically system technique using an intuitive checklist-based and or exploratory testing technique that can leverage your testing experience. There's a kind of test usually for the defect of the system, the systemic test overload. Okay, and there's also another tip and notes in the chapter 5. Okay, I think mungkin cukup ya. Saya sudah membaca keseluruhan dari bab atau chapter 5. Mungkin karena waktunya terbatas juga. Sekian, terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.